We've been studying harmful algae blooms since 2015. That year, what caught our attention was a very large and unusual bloom in Biloxi, Mississippi. It killed thousands of fish, it shut down the oyster beds, and impacted tourism. As we followed it, we went down to Lumcon in Cocotree, Louisiana, where they've been studying it since 1985. We went down to Grand Isle, Louisiana, to see the impact on the shrimpers. And now it's close to home. With the opening of the Bonacary spillway and all the fresh water and the nutrients in it, we see harmful algae blooms in Mandeville, Louisiana. Behind me you can see the beaches are closed and the residue of dead algae floats on top of the water. This experience should really bring it home for us that we've got to address the large amount of nutrients coming down the Mississippi River from fertilizer and weed killers, nitrogen and phosphorus, that are causing this huge dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. Through the last few years, we've continued monitoring the size and scope of the dead zone. We interviewed Dr. Stephen Thor, the director of the National Centers for Coastal Ocean Science at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Phyllis Taylor of the Taylor Foundation launched a $1 million challenge grant on reducing fertilizer runoff. In 2020, we stopped back at the Hardwick farm that hosted her challenge. We're going to show you the progress that is being made in reducing dead zones and reducing fertilizer runoff. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. With Stephanie Marie Louise.
Hi.
Your knowledge about what's going on with agrotoxins is out there. I mean, you're very highly educated on what's going on and a writer about the topics as well.
Yes, I'm something of an activist. I've been studying Monsanto. I've been following the laws that have been passed allowing more genetically modified crops and the toxins that were actually developed alongside of them in order to be sold for 3 years now.
And one of the things that got me motivated was looking at the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. I realized that was becoming from too much what I call agrotoxins, too much fertilizer, too much weed killer drifting down the Mississippi. And when I looked at what Congress had done in the last 10 years, they've passed more laws to allow more fertilizer use that comes down to agrotoxins in our water, whether it's New Orleans, Baton Rouge, or further upriver. We're all drinking. Now, fill me in. You talk to us about what the technical words are here.
The primary ingredient in your Roundup is a chemical called glyphosate, which was recently declared by the World Health Organization to be a Category 2A carcinogen. It's causing tumors in lab animals, and there's evidence that it's causing cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, in humans and farmers who apply this product.
Now, we've often heard that this part of the river from New Orleans to Baton Rouge is called Cancer Alley.
Yes.
And Louisiana actually has the highest cancer mortality rate in the country based on this river.
We have to protect our people here in Louisiana. The Mississippi River drains the agricultural lands of 41 states and 2 Canadian provinces. Everything that is put on land upriver goes into the river, comes down here, and it becomes our drinking water. We are paying the price, and there's no mitigation, and there is no compensation, and there's no real effort to protect us.
There's a lot of articles where Lake Erie got very aggressive with this because they had to stop the drinking water.
Right, and it's not only affecting humans, it's affecting the aquatic life as well. It's making frogs into hermaphrodites, it's killing off life, and that's going to affect our fishing industry as well as our health.
We've all lost loved ones from cancer, and it's really time to put an end to what's going on with letting these chemical companies pollute our waters, our drinking water. I mean, it's not a joke, and we're going to get that done.
I'm Robin Cron David, Executive Director of the Maritime and Seafood Industry Museum here in Biloxi. In November, December, Thanksgiving, Christmas, everyone loves to go purchase a sack of oysters and open them and have them. It doesn't necessarily just have to be on those particular days. It's like all month long, every day of the week, we could eat oysters down here. Usually it's just rain. I mean, an abundance of heavy rain is what we're accustomed to, but the algae bloom, this is very unusual. I have never seen a red tide in December. As of yesterday, I think the beaches were closed down as well as the oyster reefs, and I don't know that DMR has said when the oyster reefs will reopen again because of this algae bloom. Now there's dead fish along the beach, and they're telling people not to, eat any of the fish that are being caught right now.
Today we're down in Cocotree with Dr. Nancy Rabelais. Dr. Rabelais is well known around the world for her work on hypoxia and dead zones.
Well, we're at Lumcon, the Louisiana University's Marine Consortium. This is the Marine Center for Lumcon. and all of the state public and private universities are members of the consortium, and we provide facilities and services for people to come and do research, to have summer courses, to do educational activities. I saw LumCon when it was just dirt. I saw the pilings go in, I saw the building go up, and then 3 years after I came here, came in 1983, and 1986 we moved into the building, and there were 2 scientists and lots of space, and now there are more scientists and not as much space, which is very good because that means we've been growing and doing more things in serving science in general and science needs for the state of Louisiana. So we know the nitrate load in the Mississippi River has gone up since the 1950s. It's sort of stabilized now. We also know that the size of the low oxygen has gone up over that same time. The source of that nitrogen comes primarily from agricultural practices. Over 50% of the basin is in agriculture, and the increase in growing of just corn, especially for ethanol production, has required more fertilizer. Now that the price of fuel oil is so low, the farmers are not getting as much per bushel for their corn, and they may be or should be seeking alternative agricultural practices. Being one of the bigger dead zones in the world is not necessarily something that I take pride in. But of the over 550 in the world, the one in the Gulf of Mexico is the second largest, what we call human-caused dead zone. The largest one is in the Baltic Sea. And we say human-caused because there are some areas in the open ocean that also have low oxygen, but it's very different and it's not caused by human activity. The area of low oxygen is at most 20,000 square kilometers, or about 12,500 square miles. And the largest has been the size of the state of Massachusetts. The average has been the size of the state of New Jersey. It extends all the way from the Mississippi River Delta west as far south as Galveston or Freeport, Texas, and at times it extends to the east as far as Mobile Bay. Anything that needs oxygen has to escape, or things that live in the sediments die. So the swimmable fish and the shrimp and blue crabs, they can move out of the area. But it basically reduces their suitable habitat, so they don't have the right kind of food that they need, the right kind of temperature and salinity. They get pushed inshore, where they get caught better by human being predators with trawls. The harmful algal bloom that we had is called a red tide, and it gets into fish. It's a toxin, it kills them. And it also gets into the oysters because the oysters filter the water to get their food, and in that process they bring in the toxins. We knew that there was a problem because we had been called by Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality and Human Health and Resources to do samples to see if the red tide was in the samples, because there was a red tide that moved from the Florida Panhandle into Alabama, Mississippi, and into Louisiana east of the Mississippi River. This particular algal bloom was toxic. It generated toxins that can kill organisms, including fish. There were fish kills. The toxins can also be incorporated into oysters through their filter feeding of the water. So the Louisiana fishery was shut down for a period of time. So we were not able to harvest oysters east of the Mississippi River during peak oystering season this last winter because they were full of toxins. And even after the harmful algal bloom goes away, the toxins are still in the oyster tissue. So it's something that you need to keep your eye out for. We don't want to get sick people. Red tides or harmful algal blooms can be toxic, or they can just be what I call noxious. They can get into the gills of fish and prevent them from breathing well, or they can have a toxin which would kill them. Some of them have always been around. There are more harmful algal blooms now than there were in the past, just like the low oxygen areas, and that's related to excess nutrient runoff. So some of them are being aggravated. Some of them are more common now than they were in the past, and they're toxic. We have a toxin in a type of phytoplankton called the diatom that is very common in our coastal waters when the Mississippi River is delivering a lot of nutrients, especially nitrogen. And this particular one causes amnesic shellfish poisoning. It's not an age thing. It's actually affecting your neurons, and it causes permanent short-term memory loss, or can it even kill you if it gets into the oysters. There's a lot of die-offs of birds and seals in California because of this. Alfred Hitchcock's movie, The Birds, the idea behind those birds starting to attack and go crazy is that they had ingested fish that had consumed these little diatoms that had the toxin in them that causes amnesic shellfish poisoning. And then also marine mammals, otters, seals, walruses, they can also get the toxins in them, and often there are deaths as a result. Causes and consequences of coastal hypoxia. We drew together experts from all around the US and the world. We had international people involved who wrote individual chapters on different parts of the food web. We came up with this book, so it covers everything from the phytoplankton all the way to the fish. And it's a really good resource. If you just Google Gulf hypoxia, you can find our website, and you can also find much more up-to-date information about what we've been doing since then. The states on the river have nutrient reduction plans where they are supposed to list the steps that can be taken to reduce the nutrient load. The new goal that's 25 years off has an intermediate goal at 10 years to try to reach a 20% reduction. So some of those reduction plans are aimed at certain practices that can be done. It just takes social and political will to make it happen.
Thank you for the awesome wildlife effort that's being made down here.
I'm so glad to help you and the citizens of the state.
Celebrating Culture is brought to you by Awe News. Awe News also produces New Orleans Insider Tours, which are 10 self-guided tours of New Orleans and Louisiana. To download the apps, all you have to do is point your phone at the flow code in the camera mode, and you're ready to really experience Louisiana. In America, from ocean to ocean, from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico, we're experiencing a problem right now. It's called dead zones, harmful algae blooms. It's in Chesapeake Bay, it's in Monterey Bay, it's in Lake Erie, it's in Florida, it's all throughout the Gulf of Mexico. As we try to produce more corn for ethanol, we use more fertilizer and weed killer. And that runoff goes into our rivers and then into our open waters. And it causes the algae to bloom, which takes away the oxygen that fish need. Often we see massive fish kills, but now we're seeing kills in manatees and sea tarpons, large species. We're also seeing drinking water supplies having to be shut down. Toledo is a great example. In this segment, we'll show you how the solution requires a national effort, how the shrimp broken Grand Isle is connected to the efforts of NOAA in Maryland, and how the efforts of the northern states impact the Gulf states. Our guest is Dr. Steve Thurr, the director of the National Center for Coastal Ocean Science. He brings science to the management of a lot of issues we're facing right now with dead zones and harmful algae blooms, and how we can restore and conserve what needs to be done. Dr. Thurr is the previous director of the Coral Reef Conservation Program. Steve, how are you doing?
I am well. Thank you for having me.
Steve, so there's a lot going on right now when we're actually, August is the time where we start to measure the dead zones in the Gulf. And here in Louisiana, we know that impacts our shrimping. We hear a lot about it, but it's actually a national problem, and NOAA is addressing it nationally. What do you guys see as far as the trend right now of this long-term problem we've had?
Thanks, Charles. So you're absolutely correct that the number of hypoxic zones, which are often referred to as dead zones, are increasing, and their size are also increasing. So in the United States, the largest is in the northern Gulf of Mexico every year off the coast of Louisiana, and it's largely caused by excess nutrients coming down the Mississippi in spring and early summer, and that fuels algal blooms. When those algal cells die at the surface, they drop to the bottom, they decompose, and in the process of decomposing, they eat up the oxygen at the bottom water. And so that's what causes the hypoxic zone to form each year in the northern Gulf. And we have a fairly good handle on what we need to do to reduce nutrient inputs to reduce the size of the hypoxic zone. Currently, our scientists are looking at the human and economic impacts of the hypoxic zone. So we have nutrients coming off the land into the Mississippi system, down to the northern Gulf, creating hypoxia. What we're doing is researching how that is extended to the human community. So how is this affecting fisheries or recreation? How is it affecting things that we care about, like threatened endangered species or marine mammals? So that's the next extension of our research so that we can tell a more complete story about the impacts. We have funded studies that have shown not only do the shrimp roots need to travel further, costing them more money. When the hypoxic zone is particularly large, the shrimp don't grow as large. And so they are harvesting smaller shrimp, which command a much lower market price. And so they may harvest the same pound of shrimp per trip, but if they're not the right size, they're going to be getting less in revenue, and that's going to affect their entire working community.
Everything starts in the bottom of the sea. The little fish, the worms, everything. That's where life begins. I mean, they put everything where life begins. I mean, they destroyed a lot of areas of the Gulf of Mexico. Now the Gulf's real resilient, you know. We the cesspool of the United States. I mean, everybody throws everything in the Mississippi River and it all comes down to us. I mean, this dead zone's being caused by chemical plants. Nobody puts a chemical plant in the middle of a desert. They all put it on the river, you know. I mean, think about it. There's a reason they're on the river, so they can get rid of the chemicals that they don't want you to see when nobody's looking. It comes downstream and it comes right down to us. We're at the bottom of the river. It's causing a dead zone the last 15 years that we never had before, you know. I mean, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, they're saying it's the chemicals they're using for the crops and everything else. We're going to be getting 500,000 pounds of shrimp a day, and then the next day, nothing. They throw the nets and there's nothing there. I mean, nothing. Nothing. Everything either dies or tries to get out to where they can get oxygen. It depletes the oxygen in the water. We have shrimp jumping on the beach, committing suicide. You can walk along the beach at certain times, just pick them up with a bucket. Just pick them up with your hand. They try to get where the waves breaking to try to get oxygen, and they end up messing up and end up on the beach. I've never seen that. I've been down there, I'm 56 years old, and this only been happening the last 12, 15 years, you know, so there's something in the water that's causing that. I believe they said the one this year is going to be larger than the state of Rhode Island, is what I'd heard.
The dead zone.
The dead zone, yeah. It's right outside of Grand Isle right now because our king mackerel disappeared. The Gulf species started showing up on the inside. I mean, everything's looking to either go further out or come further in, you know, try to find more oxygen.
In 2016, Governor John Casey came to New Orleans campaigning for president. We got to ask him what he did in Ohio to solve the problem between farmers and environmentalists to reduce the amount of fertilizer in the runoffs.
What we know is that we don't want to have these algae blooms. And we know that well, you don't have the problem so much here, in parts probably, but in our state they were putting fertilizer, manure on frozen ground. And then it would run off into the streams or into the lakes. But you must have...
It all comes down to
Oh, it comes down from up north. I got you. Well, look, what we want to do is we don't want to beat our farmers up. But on the other hand, we have to teach them you cannot do that because, you know, what you're doing is you're destroying the waterways, which we can't have. So what happened in Ohio is the farm lobby was a little bit complaining about our stuff was too strong, and the environmentalists were complaining that the farmers were not doing their job and they weren't being sensitive. So I just very delicately called the people who were negotiating the agreement between the farmers and the environmentalists, and I explained to the Farm Bureau in particular that if you don't take care of this, I'm just going to take some executive action that will allow me to declare a distressed area. Now, the minute you do that, it has profound implications. And I have the authority to do it. And I said, so just so you all know, that we're not going to allow these waterways to be destroyed. So just get in a room and figure it out. And they did. And then the farmers and the environmentalists stood at a press conference, and both of them praised what we had done. And so what you really have to do, and there's a place called Grand Lake St. Mary's where we were having some of the same problem. And look, farmers don't want to destroy the environment. They just have to understand better practices. And we have technology coming that can put fertilizer on the ground that's going to not be harmful, as we've seen. And you know, look, I think this is state by state, but maybe at some point, the lessons that we learned in Ohio can be something that we can actually have a federal EPA begin to talk to state EPAs about a way to get this done in a way in which you're going to have a win-win.
Hi, we hope you've enjoyed this episode of Celebrating Culture. On News has interviewed hundreds of people and produced dozens of episodes for local broadcasting of awesome people doing great things to inspire us all. If you'd like to watch a specific interview, please visit our YouTube channel and subscribe. We're here today at the Mississippi River with Professor Richard Aubrey of Tulane University in social entrepreneurship. Tulane has taken on a tremendous task, dealing with the hypoxic zone down at the basin of the Mississippi River. Rick, welcome to the show.
Charles, it's a pleasure to be here. Tulane is developing challenges for a host of reasons. There are significant social challenges throughout the world, and challenges have proven to be a very effective way to find solutions that you otherwise would never come across. And universities have never taken on in a significant way this new methodology called grand challenges of inviting competitors to come up with ideas and to go out in the marketplace and the best solution wins. Everybody knows Charles Lindbergh. Other folks don't know there were hundreds of other people trying to solve the problem of getting across the Atlantic. There was no grant that was given to Charles Lindbergh. There was no operating funds. If you got it right, you won. He won. So the idea of challenges has reemerged as a really successful way to do it. What was somewhat groundbreaking for Tulane was to say universities have a unique set of resources and talents, the professors that work there, the knowledge that exists within the universities. Let's put those in service of this new methodology of grand challenges and run a competition from within the university to spur innovation from around the world. Dead zones are a naturally occurring situation, so like many other things, it's not that dead zones will be completely prevented or that they don't serve some purpose, but the issue is the scale and the magnitude and the human contribution to what should be a normally occurring phenomenon of a very small scale that the ecosystem can adjust to, which now is completely distorted by man-made inputs. Farmers have a difficult challenge. They're heroes in terms of meeting the world challenge of feeding as many people as possible. So they need to be incentivized to grow as much food as they possibly can. Unfortunately, one of the consequences of that is nitrogen gets applied to fields in order to maximize yields, but the nitrogen comes off the fields, ends up in the river, which comes down to the Gulf, and that's the significant source of the dead zone challenge. What we need to do is give farmers not a policy, not a prescription, not a set of regulations, but a tool that helps them achieve the simultaneous goals of maximizing the amount of food that they're able to grow while minimizing the amount of nitrogen they need to use in order to achieve that. And our donor, Phyllis Taylor, who came up with the idea of Tulane sponsoring a prize, said, I wanted to solve a problem that affects New Orleans and Louisiana, but also has implications throughout the world. We're on a farm in Northeast Louisiana. Each of the 5 semifinalists will each have 5 plots of land to test the specific technology that they come up with during an entire growing season.
We're here today in Somerset, Louisiana at Somerset Plantation at the Hardwood Planting Company and with Mead Hardwood, who's a partner in the company. Mead, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Charles. Pleasure to be here.
You were part of the Tulane Nitrogen Challenge.
That's right.
How did you get chosen?
Mrs. Phyllis Taylor, she put up $1 million to fund this contest. Now, Tulane, wonderful school, but they're not an ag school. They reached out to the LSU Ag Center and they said, we're looking to do this contest and we need a good partner, need a good farm, and we've had a long history of doing things with the LSU Ag Center, and so they reached out to us to see if we were interested. We've also done a lot of conservation-minded activities here, and so it just seemed like that was a natural fit. So that was how we got brought in. They had 5 teams, and the idea was to come up with processes or technology that would help reduce the amount of fertilizer that was available to run off downstream. AdaptIn is the name of the company that actually won, and they looked at a weather model. So you put in how many seeds you had planted, how much fertilizer you used, and then it brought in the weather. How much rain did you get? Okay, well, rain has an impact on runoff. So the idea with that is that over time, if you're using this modeling program, you could start to inch back the amount of fertilizer.
She funded that with the idea that it would be carried on.
It is my hope that innovation in this area will continue until the issue is a non-issue. until other potential solutions find applications to other similar problems.
And you guys decided to do what she asked for, take it to the next step.
At the presentation of the winter, in I think it was December of 17, my brother and I presented Mrs. Taylor with a rough proposal and said, you know, this contest is kind of over, but we would like to maybe do more. Marshall and I proposed to her a continuation of sorts of her original contest. We didn't want it to be a contest, but we proposed to her a 4-year project. She ended up funding us for $1.4 million, and we have a field where we are going to be evaluating best management practices as it relates to managing nutrients in row crops in Northeast Louisiana, which can be applicable to, outside of cotton, be applicable to the Midwest crops and things like that. And it's a way to hopefully identify practices here in a real world farm situation, not on a lab somewhere, but these are real things that can be attainable, you know, that any farmer today can go out and do. And that's what we're hoping to do, and then spread that message about what can be done to improve your bottom line, but also experiment with ways to have a smaller impact on the environment. Over the years, we've been able to increase our efficiency with nitrogen fertilizers, phosphorus fertilizers, which are the main contributor to the dead zone. So we're using the same amount of fertilizer, and we're now focusing on using less, but we're being much more efficient with it. We're putting out smaller doses multiple times, exposing fertilizer to less of the environment by putting out smaller doses. So we're getting more of it in the plant, which means there's a lot less of it going down the river.
Mead, I want to thank you for being on the show. And if someone wants to know more about you guys, do you have a website?
Well, we don't currently have a website, but we have an Instagram account. You can follow us at Hardwick Planting Co. We post regularly there about things that we're doing and new technologies, and we'd love to have some followers.
Hi, thanks for watching this episode of Awesome Wildlife Effort. There's a lot we all can do, and that starts with letting our representatives know that we really want to stop the nutrients from going in the waters and coming down and causing these dead zones around America and around the world for that matter. We can solve this problem. So please take action, and thank you for watching.